says the school's football team pauses practices after 3 players tested positive for COVID-19. Joining me now to discuss is Dr. Daria Long, a clinical assistant professor at the University of Tennessee and an emergency room physician. Doctor, thanks so much for joining me. You say that schools should behave as if everyone could have COVID and then protect everyone accordingly. What advice would you give Florida Atlantic specifically?
Yeah, Bianna, that's something I say working in the emergency department is I behave as if all my patients could have COVID and I protect myself and them accordingly. I'm telling all the schools that I advise that we want initial hypervigilance because we want schools to be able to open, not just open, but to be able to stay open. And so we need to kind of throw everything we can in terms of all the guidelines and protections initially to be able to keep schools open. Then we can start to get data and we can start to see what works and what may not be so high yield and eventually start to dial it back. But if we do the opposite and we just open the floodgates, let everybody in, we'll eventually just be shutting down after 2 weeks. We'll have no data to make decisions and we'll be right back where we started.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these schools thought, listen, we're prepared, we have enough testing, but they didn't realize that what happens just a few days once school begins, all of a sudden you have new cases and they don't know what to do and how to trace them. Let me ask you about the football players in particular at Florida Atlantic, and they've been tested weekly since they began their preseason training on campus. Could colleges and universities have more routine testing available for the entire student body? There's a big debate about tuition and campus fees. Could this be included in that?
I think testing is a very key component. I mean, you said it, Bianna, testing isn't the only component. You do testing and then you do all the other things together. We do this big layer of protection, but testing is really key, whether it's pool testing or randomized testing. That's what I'm telling a lot of the schools that I'm advising, is that's really key to start to know how all the other protocols we're doing, how they're performing in terms of keeping the infection limited and being able to rapidly identify positive cases and then rapidly isolate them and isolate any positive contacts.
Yeah, there's a lot more reporting on pool testing and perhaps a hopeful study out of Israel, too, on more sophisticated pool testing. But the CDC has just released updated guidelines, as you know, on reopening schools, talking about K through 12 as well. And they're emphasizing the importance of keeping schools open when possible. I'm going to ask this question again. I feel like we ask it every week. Can schools safely stay open for in-person classes even after just a small outbreak? Can it be contained?
So, Bianna, this is a great question because there's nuance. Schools have to know, we all have to know as a community, whatever your disease prevalence is in the community, it's going to walk into your school. We can't expect schools to do a miracle and erase COVID when the community cannot. But the point is, one isolated student walking into the school with COVID or another isolated case over here, those don't themselves mean the school has to shut down. Those mean that the school needs to work on, mitigating transmission and rapidly identifying. But that's very different. Schools, we don't want them to become amplification vectors. So again, one case here, one case there, not a big deal. But if those cases start to amplify COVID in our community, that's when we see that something's going wrong and we need to add in more protocols because we cannot just do this part way again.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't all live in an NBA bubble, right? That would just be too costly, but it's something that seems to be working. But for now, we just want to keep the numbers as low as possible in the community. Dr. Daria Long, thank you so much.
And there are other ways we can do it. So many layers. Thank you so much, Bianna. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, you too.